Imagery is one of the most important elements we need to know and understand as we continue to read and analyze poetry. What is imagery? Imagery is the author's use of language that appeals to the five senses. Those five senses being sight, smell, sound, taste, and touch. Imagery is used to help the reader imagine exactly what is being described. So rather than being told about something, by using imagery and appeals to our senses, it puts us right there into the moment and we can connect with it much better. Imagery also shapes how we interpret a poem by influencing our feelings and our emotions. Why do poets use imagery? Helps to transport a reader to a time or place. The reader experiences the poem's actions, and also the reader experiences emotional reactions to the senses. Strong connections to sensory experiences and our background knowledge really help us to connect with a poem, to identify with its subject, to put ourselves in the action, and to react the way that the poet wants us to. There are also literary devices that will be used to help create imagery, such as simile and metaphor, personification, and the use of symbols. Here's an example of a poem that uses imagery to create the subject and to give a strong visual of the subject. I've left the title out because the title would give away what's being described. But as I read the poem, follow along and listen and be aware of the images, and you'll see exactly what the poet is trying to create for us. He seemed to know the harbor, so leisurely he swam, his fin like a piece of sheet iron, three cornered and with knife edge, stirred not a bubble as it moved with its base line on the water. His body was tubular and tapered and smoke blue, and as he passed the wharf, he turned and snapped at a flat fish that was dead and floating. And I saw the flash of a white throat and a double row of white teeth and eyes of metallic gray, hard and narrow and slit. Then out of the harbor, with that three cornered fin shearing without a bubble the water, lithely, leisurely, he swam, that strange fish, tubular, tapered, smoke blue, part vulture, part wolf, part neither, for his blood was cold. So the title of this poem is The Shark. And you can see through the descriptions and the appeal to our senses, we have a strong connection. We can really visualize that shark as we read this poem. Let's take a look at another. In this poem, I've labeled the five senses on the right side, and we're going to actually identify the imagery that appeals to the specific sense. After the yellow white pie dough is rolled out flat and picked up, drooping like a round velvet mat, fitted gently into the dish, and piled with sliced sugared yellow white apples, covered with still another soft dough blanket, the whole thing trimmed and tucked in tight, then it is all so neat, so thick and filled and fat that we could happily eat it up even before it is cooked. It's always good to read a poem all the way through once before we start breaking it down and looking for specific elements. So now that we've heard it and we've read it once, we can look for images. Sight images, there's going to be a lot of sight, or those are going to be the ones that we find first. It's also important to note that not every sense will be appealed to in every poem. It's going to depend on the subject and the mood and the emotions that the poet wants to create for us. So, sight. We have the yellow white pie dough and the yellow white apples. So, there'll be appeals to color when we appeal to sight. Also, be appeals to shape. The dough is drooping and like a round mat. Appeals to smell in this poem might be harder to see, but the sugar, there's that sweet of the sugar that we smell. And we'll see that smell and taste are often connected. So not only will we smell the sugared apples, but it appeals to our sense of taste as well. There is no sound in this poem, not connecting to sound with the pie being the subject, but there is appeal to our sense of touch. So the dough is flat, velvet mat, fitted gently, that gentleness we feel, the softness, a soft dough blanket. So those appeals in that poem as an example, we're prepared to uh, look for imagery in poems that we read in the future. The idea I want to leave you with as we end this video is that poets use imagery to help readers connect to their imagination.